Today, we'll be going over key background information about the proposed deemed approved ordinance, such as how it was initiated, its intent, what it means to be deemed approved, and how this may impact businesses and communities. We will also go over the proposed ordinance's development timeline, including the steps in the legislative process and when the public will be able to provide input. And then, we'll share some concepts, including standards in consideration and how this ordinance will be implemented and enforced. Lastly, we'll share some potential resources for businesses that will be subject to these new standards in order to help them be in compliance. Background: the city began requiring businesses wishing to sell alcohol to obtain a conditional use permit, or CUP, in 1977 for on-site consumption and 1985 for off-site consumption. The CUP application process consists of a public hearing by a zoning administrator and the imposition of site-specific conditions of approval to limit potential land use impacts to the surrounding area caused by the sale of alcohol. Businesses that began operating and selling alcohol before these dates don't have a CUP and are deemed to be approved. Currently, the zoning code doesn't require these businesses to obtain a CUP so long as there is no significant change to the operation or characteristics of the business and the business does not close for a period of more than 1 year. As such, these businesses are not subject to city-imposed site-specific conditions that would normally be imposed under a CUP. In 2017, the City Council introduced Motion 170957, instructing city planning to draft an ordinance to create standards for deemed to be approved alcohol selling businesses with the intent of limiting impacts associated with these businesses. Los Angeles would not be the first city to adopt such an ordinance. The city of Oakland adopted one of the first deemed approved ordinances in 1993, which has since then been a model for various cities and counties throughout the state. The County of Los Angeles adopted its SAFE ordinance in 2017, which included a component for deemed to be approved alcohol selling businesses. Purpose: the proposed deemed approved ordinance will serve an important role in providing additional protections to communities while allowing long-serving businesses to maintain their operations. The ordinance will create general standards for deemed approved businesses to limit potential land use impacts, such as nuisances and public health and safety issues that would otherwise be addressed by a CUP and city-imposed conditions. The ordinance aims to improve city enforcement when these issues do arise at deemed approved businesses. Due to the lack of a CUP, the city, namely the police department and Department of Building and Safety, has very limited grounds to address such behavior. Oftentimes, communities and the city rely on nuisance abatement and revocation proceedings to address these concerns, which can take years and numerous resources. The new standards and the enforcement procedures that are proposed in this ordinance will serve as an additional, much-needed tool for the city to address these negative impacts. Most of the standards that will be created by the proposed ordinance will consist of basic safety practices that all alcohol selling businesses with a CUP must follow, such as maintenance of the premises, alcohol sales safety training, and monitoring patron behavior. More on these concepts will be provided at a later slide. Lastly, and importantly, we know that most deemed approved businesses are long-standing legacy businesses that contribute to their communities and do not cause issues. As such, the proposed ordinance will allow compliant businesses to stay in operation without obtaining a CUP or being subject to other penalties. Citywide implications. Here is a breakdown of who will be subject to the proposed deemed approved ordinance. It will apply citywide to businesses that have a state-issued alcohol license and began selling alcohol for on-site consumption prior to 1977 or 1985 for off-site consumption and don't have a CUP with the city. This ordinance would apply to a wide variety of businesses, including restaurants, liquor and convenience stores, bars, nightclubs, and entertainment venues, just to name a few. As long as the business meets this criteria, it will be subject to the ordinance's provisions. Deemed to be approved businesses citywide profile. One of the first endeavors we took as we began working on this ordinance was to identify the businesses that met this criteria. Given the incomplete state records and the fact that most of these businesses began selling alcohol as early as the 1920s, we've relied on various data sources to compile this list. To date, we've identified around 400 businesses in total. As seen in the map on this slide, they are all throughout the city in every community plan area and council district. The table to the left shows the community plan areas with the most deemed approved businesses. The Hollywood community plan area has the most, with 41, followed by Boyle Heights and Wilshire with 29, then Northeast LA with 26, then South LA with 20. In order to find these businesses, we looked at state alcohol licenses and city business licenses issued before 1977 and 1985. We followed leads and looked through lists of businesses given to us by community planners and other city departments. Then, we cross-checked each lead on ZMIS to verify whether there was a CUP associated with the address. If not, we kept it on our list. Development timeline. Work on the deemed approved ordinance began in January 2020. Staff began looking at ordinances adopted by other municipalities and researching current issues pertaining to deemed approved businesses. We've met with various community organizations throughout the city and reached out to several businesses. We've also had discussions within our department and other city departments, such as the Department of Building and Safety, Police Department, and City Attorney's Office. In October, we mailed out a courtesy mailer to the 400 businesses we've identified to let them know of our work on this ordinance and make ourselves available for input. This webinar is also part of our outreach efforts to collect feedback as we prepare to finalize our concepts and release an initial draft ordinance, which we hope to release by the end of this year. A staff level hearing will follow, which typically occurs 30 to 60 days after the release of a draft ordinance. The staff level hearing will allow constituents to submit feedback on the initial draft ordinance. Additional outreach will be conducted as needed. Feedback will be addressed in the staff report and changes could be made to the ordinance if required. Following the staff level hearing, the draft ordinance will be considered by the City Planning Commission. We anticipate this will take place in early 2023. During this hearing, constituents will have the opportunity to submit public comments. Following the City Planning Commission, the ordinance will need to be approved by the Planning and Land Use Management or PLUM Committee and the full City Council. Ordinance Overview. We are currently in the outreach and development phase of drafting the deemed approved ordinance, and as such, we are presenting preliminary concepts to gather input before we release an official draft ordinance. Furthermore, our initial approach of the ordinance consists of 4 parts: performance standards, operating standards, administrative provisions, and enforcement. We'll get more in detail with these components, including some of the provisions we're considering, in the next few slides. Performance standards. The first component of the deemed approved ordinance would consist of performance standards. These standards would focus on preventing nuisances and protecting the public health and safety of the community. Businesses would be prohibited from causing adverse effects to the health, peace, or safety of the surrounding area, or resulting in repeated nuisances. In addition, businesses would be required to monitor employee and patron behavior and be in compliance with all local, state, and federal laws. These performance standards would fall in line with what other municipalities have adopted in their deemed approved ordinances, namely the City of Oakland and Los Angeles County. These standards would be applicable to all deemed approved businesses, regardless of business type. Operating standards. In addition to performance standards, The ordinance would contain operating standards that mirror common conditions of approval imposed during the CUP application process. The ordinance would not go into detailed site-specific requirements, but would rather take a general approach to include standards that all alcohol selling businesses with a CUP have to follow. This includes limits on noise, graffiti removal, debris and litter pickup, installation of a camera surveillance system, and adequate indoor and outdoor lighting. The intent is to align safety and business practices between deemed approved businesses and businesses that hold a CUP. Given the diversity among deemed approved businesses, operating standards may vary depending on whether the business sells alcohol for on or off-site consumption. All businesses would also have to comply with all ABC and state law requirements regarding the sale of alcohol. This means employees must complete an adequate cell safety program and are not allowed to sell alcohol to minors or obviously intoxicated persons. Violations to any of the performance or operating standards would result in penalties, which we'll go over next. Administration and enforcement. Businesses in compliance with the performance and operating standards would continue to be deemed to be approved to sell alcohol and not be required to obtain a CUP. Businesses would not be required to come into our office or fill out any application. However, there would be certain circumstances when a business would be required to apply for a CUP. This includes when a business changes its alcohol license, for instance, upgrading from beer and wine only to a full line, if there is a substantial change in the mode or character of the business, such as an increase in square footage or hours of operation, if the business is closed for a period of more than 1 year, or if there is a significant increase in the area devoted to alcohol. Enforcement of these new standards will be led by LADBS and LAPD, and we are considering a 1-year grace period to give businesses time to make sure they are in compliance with these new standards. If a business receives a certain number of violations from LADBS or LAPD for violating any one of these standards, it would be subject to penalties, which may include having to enroll in the Monitoring, Verification, and Inspections Program, or MVIP. MVIP enrollment will ensure consistent compliance with deemed approved ordinance standards and include a minimum of 2 inspections by LADBS. Repeated violations may result in the loss of a business's deemed to be approved status. If a business loses its deemed to be approved status, it would be required to obtain a CUP if it wishes to continue selling alcohol. Resources for businesses. We understand that it may be difficult for some businesses to be in compliance with these new standards, especially those few that would require them to make physical changes to their business or buy new equipment. That said, we've been researching and meeting with organizations and other city departments to learn more about potential resources for deemed approved businesses. One of these organizations is the Food Policy Council and their Healthy Neighborhood Market Network program, which provides technical and financial assistance to local convenience stores. The Food Policy Council works closely with the Economic and Workforce Development Department, or EWDD, to administer this program. EWDD also runs the city's business source centers, which helps connect small businesses with available resources. EWDD is also currently working on the city's Legacy Business Program, which is intended to provide eligible long-time and community-serving businesses with financial and technical assistance. Given that this ordinance will impact businesses that have been open for more than 30 years, there may be some overlap between deemed approved businesses and the Legacy Business Program. Lastly, we've been in conversations with the Mayor's Office of Economic Development about other available resources. Additional information. If you have any questions regarding the proposed deemed approved ordinance, or if you would like to be placed on the interested parties list, please contact Roberto Luna by phone at 213-473-9701 or by email at roberto.luna@lacity.org. To read more about the deemed approved ordinance, you may visit the project's webpage at the link shown on this slide or by visiting City Planning's website at planning.lacity.org and looking for the deemed approved ordinance under Proposed Regulations. To view the council file associated with this ordinance or to submit a statement to the council file, please visit the City Clerk's website at the link shown on this slide and search 17-0957.